The scent of industrial-strength cleaner and cheap cotton filled my nose. I knew that smell. It was the smell of my freshman dorm a lifetime ago. The last thing I remembered was the chaos of screeching tires and everything blurring. My vision swam, the dizzying spin of temporal whiplash. The sterile white of a hospital ceiling I expected was replaced by the scuffed beige paint of my old university room. A figure stood silhouetted against the window's harsh light, hands on her hips. "So, Anya Sterling," the figure said, her voice a familiar, grating blend of faux confidence and hidden desperation. "Are you going to just lie there all day, or are we going to talk about my future?" Maya Finch. My heart didn't just skip a beat. It seized, a cold, hard fist of pure hatred clenching in my chest. Every detail slammed into me with the force of a freight train. The cheap, faded jeans, the second-hand sweater with a tiny pull at the collar, the way her mousy brown hair was pulled into a too-tight ponytail. And her eyes. Those pale, calculating eyes, already looking at me not as a person but as a resource. This was the day. The first day of our freshman year at Blackwood University. The day she'd first approached me, all false humility, to ask for guidance. In that first life I'd seen a sad, smart girl held back by circumstance. I'd seen a project, a chance to be a good person. I'd offered her a hand up. I'd handed her the opportunity she later used to unravel my life. "My future is quite secure, Maya," I heard myself say, my voice sounding strangely calm, detached. I pushed myself up on my elbows, the rustle of my high-thread count sheets absurdly loud. "Why would we need to discuss it?" She blinked, a flicker of confusion crossing her features. This wasn't in the script. In her memory, our first meeting, I'd been friendly, eager to help, a little naive. The Anya she knew should have been sitting up, offering a smile, asking about her classes. She recovered quickly, plastering on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Not my future, silly. Our future. Look, I've done my research. Your family owns Sterling Global. Riverside mansions, charity galas, the whole deal." She took a step closer and I had to fight the visceral urge to flinch back. "I'm not asking for a handout. I'm proposing an investment." The words verbatim. A cold shiver traced my spine. He was reborn too. He had to be. The arrogance, the specific phrasing, the utter lack of the shy, stumbling girl she'd pretended to be initially. It was all wrong for this timeline. She was skipping steps, going straight for the jugular with the confidence of someone who already knew it would work. "An investment," I repeated, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. I needed to be on equal footing, not lying down while she loomed. "In you." "Exactly." Her chin lifted. "You sponsor my education. Tuition, living expenses, the works. In return I excel. I get my master's, my PhD, abroad of course. I come back with credentials that shine. And I place all that expertise at the service of Sterling Global. You get a fiercely loyal top-tier executive. I get a chance. Everyone wins. Everyone wins." The echo of those words, spoken in a different tone in a luxurious penthouse office as she and Leo reviewed the paperwork that signed my family's company away, rang in my ears. I saw my father's face, gray with shock, clutching his chest. I saw my mother's vacant eyes, the untouched medication bottles scattered around her room. I remembered the blinding headlights and then everything going abruptly dark. The hatred was a living thing, a serpent coiled tight in my gut. I wanted to scream. A surge of anger hit me so sharply I had to force myself to stay composed. I wanted to shake her and demand to know how she could sleep at night. But I didn't. The coldness that had followed the initial shock was deeper, more strategic. She knew the future. But so did I. And I had one critical advantage she didn't. She thought I was still the soft, trusting fool she remembered. I let a mask of thoughtful curiosity slide over my features. It was the hardest performance of my life. "That's a very bold proposal, Maya. You sound very sure of yourself." "A person with real ability should be confident," she stated as if reciting a mantra. Her gaze swept over my organized side of the room, my laptop, the small vase of fresh flowers my mother had insisted on sending. There was a covetous hunger in that look she couldn't quite hide. She wasn't just looking at my things, she was looking at her future things. "Most people asking for sponsorship might lead with a plea or gratitude," I said softly, tilting my head. "You lead with a business proposition. It's impressive." I fed her ego just a little. Let her think her new, bold approach was working. A smirk tugged at her lips. She mistook my shock and calculation for being impressed. I'm not most people. And I know a good investment when I see one. This is yours. You have no idea, I thought. The investment I was planning would yield a return of pure ruin. For her. It's a significant commitment, I said, folding my hands in my lap. I can't just agree to something like this on the spot. I'd need to think about it. Discuss it with my parents. Her smirk faltered. Impatience flashed in her eyes. In her previous victory, I'd agreed almost immediately, swept up in the romance of being a benefactor. Think about it? What's to think about? It's a guaranteed return. Nothing is guaranteed, Maya, I said, my voice still mild. Except perhaps the need for due diligence. You understand. She scowled, the pleasant facade cracking. Don't take too long. Opportunities have an expiration date. With that, she turned on her heel and flounced out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. The moment she was gone, the calm shattered. My hands began to tremble violently. Two rushed to the bathroom, shaken to my core, echoes of that terrifying moment flickering through me mixed with the raw, emotional agony of seeing my parents' ghostly faces superimposed over the clean white tiles. I had come back. I had really come back. And so had she. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at the stranger in the mirror. Anya Sterling, 18 again. Face full of soft, untouched youth. Eyes that hadn't yet seen their father die of a broken heart or their mother fade away. I leaned closer. Were those my eyes? They looked harder already. The ghost of the woman who died in wreckage was there, lurking behind the blue iris. Maya expected the old Anya. She was playing a game of chess, thinking she was the only one who remembered the last match. She thought she could just replay her winning moves with more aggression. She didn't know I had the board memorized and I was ready to flip the table. The first priority was protection. My family. Leo. I fumbled for my phone, a sleek new model that felt oddly light and simple compared to what I remembered. My fingers flew over the screen. Dad. I know this is random. Can you have Martin do a full, quiet diagnostic on all the family cars? Especially the brakes on the Mercedes I'll use at home. Maybe a general security review of the house systems too? Just feeling cautious after all those new student orientation safety talks. My father's reply was almost instant. Dad, your mother's influence. Already paranoid about her baby being on her own. Consider it done. Everything okay, Sparkplug? The old nickname, one he hadn't used since I was a child, nearly broke me. I choked back a sob. Everything's great. Just want to be safe. Love you. Dad, love you more. Call your mother. She's already mourning an empty nest. Next, Leo. Leo Thorne. My fiancé. The man whose kisses had once felt like promises and later tasted like ashes. The man who held my hand while Maya siphoned our company's funds into offshore accounts. I couldn't break it off yet. Not abruptly. It would raise too many flags with Maya watching. I had to be strategic, create distance, dismantle his access piece by piece. His good morning text was already on my screen. Leo, morning beautiful. First day. Can't wait to see you this weekend. Mom's planning a feast. You're her favorite topic of conversation. In the old timeline, that text had filled me with a warm glow. Now it made my skin crawl. His mother's feast, that first weekend. That was the night they'd first pushed me to invest in the Thorne Capital expansion. The beginning of the bleed. Morning. So swamped already. Might need to reschedule weekend. They're piling on the reading. Let me see how it goes. Pause. Then. Leo, seriously? She's been prepping for days. I know, I feel awful. Tell her I'll make it up to her? Promise. Leo. Fine. Don't work too hard. Leave some brain space for me. I could feel his displeasure through the screen. Good. Let him get used to disappointment. The rest of the day was a blur of orientation sessions and forced smiles. I saw Maya across the quad, already holding court with a small group of wide-eyed students, no doubt regaling them with her tales of perseverance. Playing the humble, determined scholar. She caught my eye and gave a slow, knowing smile as if we shared a secret. She thought her performance was for them. She didn't realize mine was entirely for her. That night, lying in the dark, I plotted. Maya's plan was clear. Secure my funding, excel academically, attach herself to Leo, which would be easier now that they were co-conspirators from the start, and repeat their takeover. She'd try to force my hand using social pressure and my own remembered kindness against me. I needed to undermine her, but subtly. I couldn't just say no. I had to make her seem like a bad bet. An unstable, entitled, risky proposition. I had to turn her greatest asset, her foreknowledge, into a liability, making her overconfident and prone to mistakes. And I had to become someone completely different. The old Anya floated through life, trusting, guided by the currents of privilege and good intentions. That Anya was dead. The woman in this bed was made of stone and resolve. I would study not just my textbooks but every move my enemies made. I would learn the corporate structures I'd neglected, the financial loopholes I'd found boring. I would become the heir my father needed, not the daughter he pampered. My phone glowed in the dark with a calendar alert for the next day. Library, 9 a.m. Get ahead on econ reading. A small, grim smile touched my lips. In the old life I'd skipped that, choosing to go shopping with Maya, using my credit card to buy her a starter wardrobe for college. A gesture of goodwill that she'd later mocked as patronizing. This time I'd be in the library. And when she came looking for me, as I knew she would, the game would truly begin. The first move was mine. I had simply declined to play her opening. Now I had to craft my own. The board was set. The pieces were moving. And this time I was playing for blood. The library became my sanctuary. The hushed whispers, the scent of old paper and dust, the solid weight of a textbook in my hands. It was all armor. Every chapter one read, every concept I mastered, was a brick in the fortress I was building between my family and the cliff edge. I arrived at 8:55 a.m., claiming a secluded corral in the back of the economics section. I needed the high ground both literally and figuratively for what was coming. I didn't have to wait long. Just after 10 a.m. the predictable angry click of cheap shoes on linoleum announced her. Maya stormed into my aisle, her face a mask of theatrical fury. The performance had begun. Anya Sterling. Her voice was a sharp hiss, deliberately loud enough to draw glances from a few nearby students. We need to talk. Now. I looked up slowly, marking my page with a deliberate calm. Maya. This is a library. Is there an emergency? You're the emergency, she shot back, planting her hands on my table and leaning in. When are you going to honor your commitment? Do you have any idea how awkward you're making this for me? The audacity was breathtaking. Even knowing it was coming, the sheer weaponized entitlement made my pulse thrum in my ears. I kept my face a careful blank. Commitment? I recall saying I would think about your proposal. I don't remember signing a contract. Her eyes narrowed. She was trying to read me to see if I was just being difficult or if something fundamental had shifted. You led me on, she declared, her voice rising another notch. A girl 2 tables over shushed her angrily. Maya ignored her, playing to a growing audience. Because of your consideration, she spat the word, I turned down other avenues of support. I didn't apply for certain scholarships, thinking I didn't need to burden the system. I left a spot for someone truly needy. And now I'm left with nothing because you're dragging your feet. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. The green tea tactic, portraying herself as the selfless victim of a capricious rich girl. I could see the narrative clicking into place for the onlookers. The privileged heiress toying with the poor girl's future. Their gazes shifted from her disruptive anger to me, tinged with disapproval. Maya saw it too, a glint of triumph in her eyes. She'd backed me into a corner. The old Anya would have crumbled, apologizing profusely, rushing to wire funds just to clear her name and quiet the scene. But the old Anya was gone. I leaned back in my chair, projecting an air of cool assessment. That's a serious accusation, Maya. And a rather poor strategic decision on your part. I kept my voice low, reasonable, forcing the listeners to lean in. You based a critical life choice on a verbal conversation with a teenager you just met? Before any due diligence was done? That doesn't sound like the savvy business mind you presented to me. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. This wasn't the script. It's not about strategy, it's about basic human decency, she rallied, her tone becoming pleading, a mask of vulnerability slipping over the anger. Anya, your family has so much. Your monthly allowance is probably more than my parents make in a year. Would it kill you to show a little kindness? To help someone who just wants to learn? Kindness. The word was a punch to the gut. I saw my mother's kindness, the pills by her bed. My father's kindness, trusting Leo with the books. I smiled, a thin, cold thing. Kindness is a virtue, Maya. But so is wisdom. And wise kindness requires discernment. Yes, my family has resources. And yes, we often use them to help. But we have a responsibility to ensure that help doesn't empower the wrong people. What if I sponsor someone who turns out to be ungrateful? Or worse, malicious? What if I create a monster? That wouldn't be kindness. That would be negligence. I held her gaze, and for a split second, the mask of the wounded scholar fell away completely. I saw the raw, startled hatred of the woman who had laughed at my parents' graves. She heard the subtext. She just couldn't believe I was capable of it. You need to investigate me, she spluttered, genuine outrage now mixing with the performative kind. For a month? What is there to investigate? I'm a poor girl who wants an education. A month seems a reasonable starting point for a lifelong investment, I said calmly. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. Her voice, tinny but clear, filled the quiet space between us. You sponsor my education. Tuition, living expenses, the works. In return I excel. You get a fiercely loyal top-tier executive. I get a chance. Everyone wins. I stopped the recording. The silence in the aisle was absolute. The narrative had just been upended. That, I said softly to the now rapt audience, was her business proposal to me on the first day we met. Not a plea for help. A demand for an investment in a guaranteed return. Does that sound like someone who's been misled, or someone who tried to skip the line and is now angry the rules still apply? The shift was instantaneous. The whispers now were about her, about the arrogance, the astonishing entitlement. Maya's face flushed a deep mottled red. She looked from the shocked faces around us to my placid one, her chest heaving. You recorded me? How dare you? I often record important business meetings, I said, tucking the phone away. For clarity. You presented it as a business meeting, didn't you? She was floundering. The script was in tatters. So what? A person with ambition should be confident. Confidence is one thing. Presumption is another. I stood up, gathering my books. I had the high ground and it was time to advance. The investigation, as you call it, is ongoing, Maya. I suggest in the future you apply for those scholarships you so nobly declined. They tend to prefer applicants who don't consider their support a foregone conclusion. I walked away, leaving her standing there, humiliated and seething. The victory was small, a skirmish, but it was vital. I'd exposed her first play, turned the social pressure back on her, and planted a seed of doubt in everyone's mind about who Maya Finch really was. I didn't make it far. She caught up to me outside on the stone steps, grabbing my arm with surprising force. I wrenched it free, turning to face her. Okay, fine, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. You want to play hardball? Then just help me with one thing. I have a meal debt at the cafeteria. Just cover that. Call it a loan. I stared at her. The shamelessness was truly boundless. A loan. Yes. I'll pay you back triple once I'm on my feet. I'm telling you, Anya, you'd better be nice to me now. You'll regret it if you're not. The threat, so baldly stated, hung in the air between us. It was a crack in her reborn facade, a glimpse of the desperate timeline-hopping schemer beneath. She was so sure of her destiny, of her triumphant future, that she couldn't conceive of a world where it didn't come to pass. How much? The question was pure morbid curiosity. Not much. 6,000 should cover it. She said it like she was asking for $6. I actually laughed, a short, sharp sound. 6,000? For a month of cafeteria meals? What are you eating? Gold leaf steak every day. Her jaw tightened. I have expenses. Networking is important. Just transfer it. And how precisely do you plan to pay me back? Triple? With your guaranteed future riches. I let the mockery drip into my tone. Forgive me if I'm not eager to invest in a fantasy. Or in someone who racks up debt to network before they can afford a cup of coffee. Anya, what is wrong with you? She exploded, the frustration of the last hour, the last month of her new life, boiling over. She searched my face, and this time the suspicion wasn't just about sponsorship. It was darker, more fundamental. You're different. I raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. I barely know you, Maya. Why would I be the same as I was when we first met? She stared hard, looking for a sign, a flicker of recognition of our shared terrible secret. I gave her nothing but the cool, detached expression of a wealthy girl mildly irritated by a persistent beggar. The fight seemed to drain out of her, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. Fine, she said, her voice flat. You won't sponsor me. You won't even lend me a paltry 6,000. Remember this moment, Anya Sterling. I hope you won't regret it. She turned and marched away, her spine rigid. I watched her go, the small, savage satisfaction from the library evaporating. This wasn't over. A humiliated snake was more dangerous than a confident one. She would change tactics. She would seek other avenues. And I knew exactly where she would turn next. Leo. My suspicions were confirmed sooner than I expected. A week later, I was heading to the university gates for a rare weekend trip home when I saw them. Leo's black Aston Martin was idling at the curb, a symbol of Thorn capitals, currently still intact, prosperity. And there was Maya, leaning against the passenger side window, her body language a studied mix of shy admiration and intellectual engagement. She was talking animatedly, smiling up at him. Leo looked polite, bored even. The Leo of this timeline didn't know her yet, had no shared history of conspiracy. To him she was just another student and likely a tiresome one. Then he saw me. His face transformed, lighting up with a practiced, dazzling smile. He immediately straightened, said a brief word to Maya, and came around the car to meet me, pulling me into a hug that felt like a cage. There she is, he murmured into my hair. His cologne, something expensive and musky, triggered a wave of nausea. I've missed you. This studying thing is cutting into my time. It is the point of university, I said, extracting myself with a light laugh. He kept an arm around my waist, possessive. Mom is beside herself waiting for you. She's made enough food for a small country. I glanced past him. Maya was still standing there watching us. The jealousy and hatred on her face were so naked it was almost shocking. This was the first time she was seeing us together in this new life, seeing the dynamic she planned to usurp. It was clearly a physical blow. I leaned into Leo, playing my part. I can't wait. But listen, I just got a text. My mom's not feeling great. I think I should head straight home. Rain check. His smile froze. Anya, come on. She's been planning this for a week. I know, and I feel terrible. It's just a headache, but you know how I worry. I laid a hand on his chest, feeling the steady, traitorous beat of his heart. Tell her I'll make it up to her. Next weekend I'm all yours. The frustration in his eyes was real. He'd been counting on this dinner, on the cozy family atmosphere, to begin the slow process of weaving my family deeper into his financial web. I was denying him the first thread. Fine, he said, the word tight. But you're spoiling her and you're spoiling me. I gave him a quick, chaste kiss on the cheek, another performance for the watching Maya. I'll call you tonight. As I slid into the town car my father had sent, Martin, our head of security, gave me a discreet thumbs up from the driver's seat, signaling the vehicle diagnostic was clean. I looked back. Leo was walking back to his car, ignoring Maya completely now. She stood alone on the curb, staring after my departing car, her fists clenched at her sides. The pieces were moving. Maya had been publicly checked. Leo was annoyed and off balance. My family's immediate safety was being shored up. But as we drove away from the university, the heart of the old Anya, the one that still lived somewhere beneath the stone and resolve, gave a painful squeeze. This was just the beginning. The loneliness of this secret war was a weight I hadn't fully anticipated. I was surrounded by people. Roommates, classmates, Leo, my loving parents, and yet I was utterly alone, living in a ghost world of memories they couldn't see, fighting enemies they didn't believe existed. I pulled out my economics textbook, but the words swam before my eyes. Instead, I saw Maya's jealous glare and Leo's frustrated smile. The battlefield was drawn. The next move was theirs. And I would be waiting, my kindness buried deep, replaced by a cold, patient cunning. The girl who died in a wreck was gone. In her place was a strategist, and the war for my future had just begun in earnest. The silence Maya imposed was a relief. After the library confrontation, she no longer spoke to me directly. Instead, she waged a whispering campaign. I'd walk into a common room and the chatter would die, replaced by speculative glances. I became the stingy heiress, the girl who toys with people's futures, the caricature she'd so carefully painted. My roommates, 3 perfectly nice girls named Chloe, Sophie, and Danny, grew frosty, their conversations clipping short when I entered. Maya had gotten to them first, no doubt with tales of her noble poverty and my heartless dithering. I didn't bother to defend myself. In the first life, I'd wasted so much energy trying to win over people whose opinions were bought by Maya's borrowed generosity. This time that energy had a single laser-focused purpose: my own strength. The library was my true dorm room. I buried myself in corporate finance, strategic management, and corporate law. I wasn't just reading to pass a class. I was studying the blueprints of the prison Maya and Leo had built for my family, learning where the weak points were, where the locks could be picked from the inside. My father, thrilled by my sudden academic fervor, had his assistant send over actual sterling global annual reports and prospectuses. "Get the real picture, Sparkplug," he'd said over the phone, his voice warm with pride. The weight of those documents, dense with numbers and legalese, was terrifying and empowering. I was learning the language of my own destruction, and in doing so I was learning how to prevent it. The first major test came with midterms. The old Anya had coasted, relying on charm and a decent memory. This Anya had memorized textbooks, written and rewritten practice essays, and formed a small, quiet study group with two serious-minded students from my economics seminar who cared more about Gaussian distributions than dormitory drama. Results were posted online. I refreshed the page, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Econ 101, A+. History 150, A. Lit 120, E. Calc I, D. I was ranked first in my freshman class. A rush of pure, undiluted triumph flooded me. It wasn't about the grades. It was about agency. It was proof that I could change the script, that my mind, disciplined and focused, was a weapon she hadn't accounted for. The fallout was immediate and delicious. The university awarded a prestigious freshman scholarship based on that ranking. A small ceremony was held. I stood on a modest stage, shaking the dean's hand, accepting a certificate as my parents beamed from the front row. Across the auditorium I saw Maya. Her face was a frozen mask of pure, incandescent fury. Her plan had required her to be the academic star, the worthy investment. I had just stolen her narrative and her funding source in one move. The slap in the face wasn't enough for her. She needed to break my hand. 2 days after the scholarship announcement, a post appeared on the university's anonymous confessions page. It was quickly shared everywhere. Some people are born in Rome. They don't need to climb the mountain is brought to them. Must be nice to top the class when daddy's name is on a building. How many scholarships did you buy, Anya? #privilege, #not fair, #real students suffer. It was crude but effective. The rumor, once a dormant suspicion, was now a public accusation. Whispers followed me everywhere. Did you hear? I always wondered how she aced calc. Her dad probably called the dean. The looks were no longer just speculative. They were accusing, disdainful. My professors grew stiff and formal. The dean's office summoned me. It was a small wood-paneled room that smelled of lemon polish and anxiety. "Miss Sterling," the dean, a severe woman named Weatherby, began, steepling her fingers. "These are serious allegations. They not only impugn your character but the integrity of this institution and its faculty." I sat straight-backed, my hands folded in my lap. "There lies Dean Weatherby. And I believe I know the source." "That is not our primary concern at the moment," she said, though her eyes sharpened. "Our concern is verification. To protect the university's reputation, we will be conducting a full review. This will include a regrading of your midterm exams by an external professor, an audit of your admissions file, and interviews with your instructors." "I welcome it," I said, and I meant it. "I have nothing to hide. But while you're verifying my work, I would ask you to also verify the source of this slander. I believe it stems from a personal grievance regarding a refused request for private sponsorship." I gave her Maya's name. I didn't embellish. I simply stated that after I declined to fund her education, hostilities had begun. Dean Weatherby's lips thinned. She disliked mess, and this was becoming a very public one. The investigation was swift and thorough. My exams were sent out. My high school transcripts, my SAT scores, perfectly respectable but not bought. My admissions essay were all scrutinized. The external professor not only confirmed my grades but wrote a note complimenting the clarity of my economic reasoning. Within a week, the university issued a formal statement. All allegations were baseless. Anya Sterling's academic record was her own. Furthermore, the statement said the university had identified the source of the malicious post, Maya Finch. For knowingly spreading false information with intent to harm, she was given a major disciplinary mark and required to post a public apology on the confessions page and write a formal letter of retraction to the administration. The backlash against her was vicious. The social currency she'd built as the plucky underdog evaporated overnight. Now she was the malicious liar, the jealous schemer. Her two remaining sycophant roommates suddenly found urgent study sessions elsewhere. She walked across campus like a ghost, shrouded in a bubble of isolating scorn. I watched it all from a distance, my satisfaction cold and precise. The disciplinary mark was the real prize. It was a permanent stain. It would torpedo any chance of graduate school recommendations, kill study abroad applications, and follow her like a bad smell. I had severed her primary escape route from the life she so despised. The trap was closing one bar at a time. I thought, perhaps naively, that this would break her or at least force a retreat. I underestimated the sheer, grinding resilience of her hatred. She didn't crumble. She transformed. The performative victimhood was gone, replaced by a silent, simmering focus. I started noticing her in the library at odd hours, not socializing, but hunched over IELTS and TOEFL prep books, her face a mask of grim determination. She was changing tactics. If she couldn't go up through the sanctioned American academic route, she'd go out. She was plotting to leapfrog the system entirely, to get overseas by any means necessary. But how? Those tests were expensive. Application fees were steep. Flights, visas, overseas tuition. It was an order of magnitude more costly than strong-arming me for a monthly allowance. The answer came in a bizarre, gaudy package. It was a Tuesday evening when Maya returned to the dorm, her arms laden with shopping bags from high-end boutiques I knew she couldn't afford. She was followed by a delivery man carrying a box containing what looked like a professional-grade espresso machine. She was smiling, a brittle, triumphant thing. "Little celebration," she announced to the room, ignoring me completely. She began pulling out boxes of imported chocolates, designer scarves, and a bottle of perfume that cost more than my semester's textbooks. My sponsor came through. Really came through. Sophie and Danny, their memories apparently short, drifted over, cooing over the loot. "Sponsor? Who is it?" Sophie asked, eyeing a silk scarf. "An older woman," Maya said airily, waving a hand. "Fabulously wealthy, terribly bored. She believes in investing in diamonds in the rough. She thinks I have sparkle." She shot a venomous glance my way. Not everyone needs a building named after them to get attention. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening certainty. It wasn't an older woman. It was Leo. He'd made contact. He'd seen her humiliation, her determination, and he'd seen an opportunity. In this timeline, their alliance wasn't born from a long courtship and shared betrayal of me. It was a colder, more direct transaction. He would fund her escape and her ascension. She would provide him with the insider knowledge and ruthless ambition he needed to take down Sterling Global. She had shown her hand to him, the reborn hand, and he had bought in. The game had just escalated. Maya was no longer a lone wolf. She was a funded operative. "An older woman with very particular tastes," I said, not looking up from my law textbook. "How convenient for you." Maya's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Isn't it just? She understands potential. Unlike some." The next few weeks were a bizarre pantomime. Maya, flush with mysterious cash, played the generous patron to Sophie and Danny, who flocked back to her side. She talked constantly of her impending departure, of universities in Switzerland and England, of a future so bright it required sunglasses. "When I'm successful, I won't forget you too," she'd simper, and they'd eat it up. I kept my head down, my studies my shield and my sword. I also began my own, quieter investigation. Through a discreet family connection, I hired a private investigator. His instructions were simple. Document Maya Finch's financial inflows. Find the source. The report came back quicker than I expected. Large, regular cash deposits into a new bank account under Maya's name. The deposits originated from a shell company, a holding LLC with a Cayman Islands address. The paper trail was deliberately murky, but the PI had a footnote. The registered agent for this LLC has ties to several East Coast investment firms, including Thorn Capital Ventures. There was the smoking gun. Leo wasn't even being particularly careful. Why would he be? He thought I was a clueless, study-obsessed teenager. He had no idea I was hunting him. I now had a choice. Expose it. Send the report to the university to my father. It would cause a scandal, possibly implicate Leo. But it would also reveal my own knowledge, my own investigation. It might spook them into a different, less predictable plan. Though I needed them to feel secure to continue down the path I could foresee. I filed the report away in a locked drawer, both physical and mental. It was ammunition for later. The end of Maya's act arrived not with a whisper but with a scream. It was a crisp autumn afternoon. I was returning from the library when I saw the crowd gathered near our dorm entrance. A familiar, shrill voice was shrieking. "Get off me! Let go!" Pushing through the onlookers, I saw the scene. A man and a woman dressed in cheap but flashy clothes had Maya by the arms. A younger man, maybe 18, with a sneer and expensive-looking sneakers, stood blocking her path. Her family. Her father, red-faced with anger. Her mother, whose grip on Maya's hair was vicious. Her brother, Derek, looking bored and aggressive. "You think you can run away?" Her parents pulled her away quickly, their voices sharp and overwhelming. "We fed you, clothed you, and you want to fly off to some foreign country and forget us? You ungrateful little snake." "I'm not going home," Maya wailed, a raw, genuine terror in her voice I'd never heard before. This wasn't part of her script. This was the nightmare her first life had been designed to escape. "You can't make me. Watch me," her father growled. "We're withdrawing you today. You're coming home. Your mother found a good match for you. You'll be married by spring." The crowd murmured, a mix of horror and morbid fascination. The narrative of the poor scholar shattered completely. This was a different kind of poverty, a grasping, transactional, brutal one. Maya's eyes, wild with panic, swept the crowd. They landed on Sophie and Danny, who were cowering near the back. "Help me. Please," she begged. They looked at their feet and melted into the crowd. Her bought loyalty had cost exactly one silk scarf and a box of chocolates. Then her gaze found me. I stood apart, silent, watching. Our eyes locked. In her utter devastation, I saw the moment of crystal-clear understanding. She saw no shock on my face, only a cold, observant calm. She saw the lack of surprise. The word wasn't spoken, but it hung between us in the charged air. "You did this." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. I gave a tiny, slow nod. "I did." The realization broke her. "Ananya," she screamed, her voice cracking, pointing a trembling finger at me. "It was you. You told them. You're reborn too, aren't you?" The crowd gasped, confused by the bizarre accusation. "Reborn? What did that mean?" I simply raised an eyebrow, my expression one of detached pity for the ravings of a hysterical girl. Her parents, confused and enraged by her outburst, used the moment to drag her away with renewed force, her screams fading into the distance. The show was over. The students dispersed, buzzing with the juicy scandal. I turned and walked back to the dorm, my heart a steady, cold drum. The investigator's second task had been simple. Find Maya Finch's family. Give them an anonymous tip about their daughter's plans to permanently leave the country, along with a fabricated story about a rich, older foreigner who was grooming her. It was a dirty trick, a weaponization of their own worst natures. But I felt no remorse. He had used my kindness as a weapon. I used her prison as hers. One enemy was being hauled back to her cage. She was finished. Her dreams of passports and PhDs were ashes. But as I climbed the stairs to my quiet room, I knew the more dangerous enemy remained. Leo was still out there, his resources intact, his ambition undimmed. And now he was wounded, his pawn taken off the board. A wounded, wealthy predator was the most dangerous kind. Maya's war was over. Mine with Leo Thorne was just beginning. The silence Maya left behind was different this time. It wasn't the tense, gossip-filled quiet of her campaign against me, but a true absence. Her bed was stripped, her cheap wardrobe empty. The dorm felt larger, the air easier to breathe. Sophie and Danny tiptoed around me with a new, wary respect, their earlier allegiance exposed as the fair-weather friendship it was. They'd seen the real Maya Finch, and by extension, they'd glimpsed the steel in the girl they'd dismissed as a pampered princess. I felt no triumph, only a grim sense of a necessary task completed. The news filtered through the university grapevine quickly. Maya Finch had officially withdrawn. The whispers said her parents had dragged her back to their small town, that a marriage had been arranged to pay off family debts. Her destiny of academic glory and vengeful triumph had been rerouted to a dusty main street and a life of domestic drudgery. It was a fate she considered worse than death. For me it was simply justice. But justice, I was learning, was not a single act. It was a landscape. And on the other side of that landscape stood Leo Thorne. With Maya gone, his attention pivoted back to me with an intensity that was both predictable and unnerving. His texts became more frequent, more cloying. Now that the drama is over, we can finally focus on us. I miss my girl. Mom is planning that makeup dinner. You can't say no this time. He was reasserting his claim. Maya had been a useful, exciting secret, a co-conspirator with a roadmap to the future. But she was also a liability, a poor girl with baggage. I was the legitimate prize, the key to the vault. He needed to secure me. I played my part with meticulous care. I was warmer than I had been, but always just out of reach. I'd agree to a date, then cancel last minute, citing a brutal study schedule, which was true. I'd send affectionate texts but keep calls short. I was rebuilding the facade of the girlfriend brick by brick, while ensuring there was always a moat between us. I was training him to expect my unavailability. Meanwhile, I turned my academic focus outward. I declared a double major in finance and business ethics, a pointed choice that made my father chuckle. I joined the university's investment club, not as a socialite, but as a quiet analyst. I used my access to Sterling Global's non-confidential reports to build mock portfolios, to understand market pressures. I was building a resume not for a job but for a takeover of my own life. Leo watched this with a mixture of pride and growing unease. The old Anya's lack of ambition had been a feature, not a bug. It made me pliable. This new version was unpredictable. You're going to give yourself wrinkles before you're 20, he said one evening, pulling me into a corner at a tiresome frat party he'd insisted we attend. His hands were on my waist, his breath smelling of expensive whiskey. All the studying. What's the point? When we're married, you won't need to work a day in your life. You can spend your time redecorating our houses and planning fabulous vacations. Leave the boring numbers to me. The words were a perfect echo of the poison that had paralyzed me in another life. I looked up at him, his handsome face softened by the dim, pulsing lights, and saw the prison warden smiling kindly at the bars. I enjoy the boring numbers, I said lightly, extracting myself to take a sip of soda. It's like a puzzle. And I like knowing how things work. Don't you want a wife who understands your world? His smile tightened. I want a wife who's happy. Stressing over balance sheets doesn't look like happiness to me. He tried to pull me back. Come on, let's get out of here. My place is quiet. The subtext was a physical weight in the air. In the first timeline, this was the year our relationship had become physically serious. It was another leash, another layer of emotional manipulation. I had avoided being alone with him for months. The party excuse was wearing thin. I can't, I said, injecting genuine regret into my voice. I have a presentation tomorrow at 8 a.m. My group is counting on me. Rain check. Frustration flashed in his eyes, quick and hot before being banked. Always a rain check with you lately, Anya. Starting to think you're avoiding me. Avoiding you? I laughed, the sound perfectly calibrated. A little hurt, a little teasing. Leo, I'm drowning in work. It's just this semester. Once I'm through finals, I'm all yours for the whole summer. Promise. The promise of future access soothed him. He kissed my forehead, a patronizing gesture. Fine. But I'm holding you to that. The summer. That was my deadline. I needed to be ready. My true preparation happened far from Leo's prying eyes. Through the family lawyer, a discreet and fiercely loyal man named Mr. Eris, I began a separate, secret education. He set up encrypted channels and secure meeting places. Your father would have a heart attack if he knew you were asking about poison pills, golden parachutes, and hostile takeover defenses, Mr. Eris murmured over tea in a private club back in the city, his kind, wrinkled face serious. Then we won't tell him, I said, my voice steady. Not yet. I need to understand, sir. Not in theory. In practice. What are Sterling Global's vulnerabilities? What would someone like Thorne Capital look for? He studied me for a long moment. This isn't academic curiosity, is it, Anya? No, sir. It's not. He didn't ask for details. He was a man who had seen corporate battles and family feuds for 50 years. He simply nodded. All right. But we do this carefully. And you follow my lead. Under his tutelage, I learned the real architecture of my family's empire. I saw the strong points, the loyal board members my grandfather had appointed, the ironclad voting trust that controlled 40% of the shares, the heiress clause in the corporate charter, named for him, that made a change of control provision nearly impossible without family consent. And I saw the weak spots. A few aging, discontented minority shareholders. A real estate subsidiary that was underperforming and ripe for a leveraged buyout. A line of credit with a bank that had recently been acquired by a larger conglomerate with ties to Thorn Capital. My blood ran cold. The tendrils were already there seeking purchase. He's been sniffing around, Mr. Harris confirmed, seeing my face. Small things. Inquiries about the subsidiary. A lunch with one of the disgruntled shareholders. Nothing actionable. Yet. We need to make it unactionable, I said. And so we began to quietly fortify. Using a portion of a trust fund I'd accessed on my 20th birthday, and with Mr. Harris as my blind, we started buying up tiny scattered blocks of Sterling Global shares on the open market, channeling them through a network of anonymous trusts. We were a ghost, gathering sand one grain at a time. We made a lowball offer for the underperforming subsidiary through a shell company, not to buy it, but to force Sterling Global's management to reevaluate and restructure it, pulling it out of the bargain bin. Mr. Harris had a quiet word with the family-friendly board member who chaired the audit committee, suggesting a review of all banking relationships. We were setting tripwires and reinforcing walls. Leo, confident in his future insider knowledge, would be walking into a fortress he didn't know had been upgraded. My 20th birthday arrived. A milestone that in the old life had been a blur of champagne and Leo's very public, very fake diamond proposal. This time my parents threw a gala at the Sterling penthouse. It was a glittering affair full of Society Pages photographers, business associates, and my new serious university friends who looked wide-eyed at the opulence. Leo arrived, impeccable in a tuxedo, his arm possessively around me from the moment he entered. He was playing the role of the devoted boyfriend to perfection, his smiles for the cameras bright and sure. I could feel the tension humming in him, a coiled spring. He'd been patient for 2 years. The Hayes Corporation, no, the Thorn Capital Group in this life, was, as I knew from my own investigations, quietly hemorrhaging. Bad investments, over-leverage, the first life's cracks appearing earlier without my family's money to plug them. He needed a lifeline. He needed to lock me down. After dinner, as a string quartet played, my father took the microphone. He spoke of his pride, my mother's tears glistening beside him. He talked about legacy and future and love. Every word was a dagger in my heart, knowing what they'd suffered because of me. Then as my father finished, Leo stepped forward, taking the mic. The room hushed, anticipating the show. Cameras clicked. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, Leo began, his voice smooth as velvet. You've spoken about legacy and future. And for me, Anya has always been the heart of both. He turned to me, his eyes performing a depth of feeling that almost convinced me. Anya, we've known each other since we were in diapers. I've watched you grow into this incredible, brilliant, beautiful woman. I've loved you through every stage. He knelt. A collective, theatrical gasp swept the room. My mother clutched my father's arm. I stood frozen, my smile plastered on, a mannequin awaiting its script. My world only makes sense with you in it, he continued, his voice cracking with manufactured emotion. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? I promise to spend every day of my life making you happy. He opened a velvet box. The ring inside caught the light, a sizable solitaire. It was different from the last one. Bigger. But even from a few feet away, something about the way the light refracted looked off. Was it another fake? A bigger, bolder lie? The room held its breath. All eyes were on me. This was his masterstroke. Public pressure, romantic spectacle, the sealing of the deal in front of the world that mattered to us. In the old life I'd cried and said yes. I looked at his expectant face, at the performative love in his eyes. I looked past him to my parents, my father beaming, my mother sniffling into a handkerchief. This was the crux. The moment I could shatter it all. But a cold voice in my head, the voice of Mr. Eris, counseled patience. Let them show their hand fully before you show yours. I let the silence stretch a beat too long, saw the first flicker of uncertainty in Leo's eyes. Then I let my own eyes fill with tears, not of joy but of overwhelmed confusion. I took a half step back, a gesture the crowd read as shock. Liv, this is so sudden, I stammered, my voice catching. It's so beautiful. But, in front of everyone, I brought a hand to my mouth, the picture of a flustered, overjoyed but shy young woman. It wasn't a no. It was a delay. But it was a public stumble in his perfectly choreographed dance. His smile wavered, then fixed itself. I want the whole world to know how I feel about you, he said, rising, trying to regain control. He took the ring from the box. Hey, I extended my left hand, trembling slightly. He slid the ring onto my finger. It was cold and slightly too large. The stone looked even more dubious up close. The crowd erupted into applause, the tension breaking. He pulled me into a crushing embrace, whispering in my ear, "You had me worried for a second, beautiful." Over his shoulder, I caught Mr. Eris's eye across the room. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. The first act was over. The engagement was on, a social fact. The trap for Leo was now officially set. He thought he had secured his future. He had just fastened the noose around his own neck. The rest of the night was a blur of congratulations and flashing lights. I played the blushing fiancé, showing off the ring, laughing at jokes I didn't hear. Inside, I was a clockwork mechanism ticking down. Later, as the party dwindled, Leo found me on the terrace, overlooking the city lights. "Well, Mrs. Thorne-to-be," he said, slipping an arm around me. "How does it feel?" "Surreal," I answered truthfully. "Get used to it," he said, his tone shifting, becoming businesslike. "Now that we're officially a team, we should start planning. My father was thinking, with our families joined, it's the perfect time for some synergistic investments. Thorne Capital has some incredible opportunities on the horizon, but we're a little capital light at the moment. A joint venture with Sterling Global could be." And there was the ask. Sooner than I'd expected. The desperation was closer to the surface. I leaned my head against his shoulder, hiding my face. "Leo, not tonight, okay? Tonight is just about us. The business stuff, that's for tomorrow. Let me just have this one night to be happy." He sighed, a sound of suppressed irritation, but kissed the top of my head. "Of course. Tonight is yours." I looked out at the glittering city, the ring a heavy, fraudulent weight on my finger. The engagement was a lie. The ring was a lie. His love was a lie. But my vengeance would be the only truth in this gilded fiction. The game had entered its final, most dangerous phase. He had made his move. Now I would make mine. And I had the perfect weapon. The truth he thought was his and Maya's secret. I knew every sin he had yet to commit. And I was ready to make him pay for all of them in this life, before he could commit a single one. The engagement ring was a lead weight on my hand, a constant cold reminder of the lie I was living. I played my part flawlessly. I let Leo post gushing photos on social media. I attended tedious Thorne family dinners, smiling vacuously while his father, Gregory Thorne, dropped increasingly heavy hints about family solidarity and pooling resources. I accepted the congratulations of my parents' friends, my stomach churning every time someone called me the future Mrs. Thorne. The facade was a prison of silk and smiles, but inside I was a general preparing for siege. Mr. Eris was my quartermaster and our clandestine operations accelerated. The shell company we'd used to make the bid for the underperforming Sterling subsidiary had served its purpose. The board, spurred by our external interest, had conducted a review and decided to spin it off with a fresh infusion of capital and new management. The weak spot was being healed. Our anonymous trust continued its quiet, relentless acquisition of shares. We were now the largest unknown minority shareholder. "He's getting anxious," Mr. Eris reported during one of our secure calls. "Thorne's CFO has approached 2 of the remaining disgruntled shareholders with buyout offers. The offers are aggressive. Leverage to the hilt. He's gambling." "He's desperate," I corrected, staring out my dorm window. The semester was ending, and with it the fragile barrier of my studies. Leo's expectation of my summer availability was a palpable pressure. He needs a win or a cash infusion before his house of cards collapses. Your father is starting to hear whispers, Mr. Ayres said, his voice grave. About Thorn Capital's liquidity problems. He asked me about it casually. I confirmed the whispers have merit. He wasn't pleased. He asked if this affected you. My heart clenched. What did you say? I said you were a smart, clear-eyed young woman who understood the difference between romance and business. He paused. He trusts you, Anya. More than you know. But he's protective. If he thought Leo was using you, he'd call off the engagement himself, I finished. A tempting thought, but it would rob me of the final, satisfying snap of the trap. I wanted Leo exposed, humiliated, destroyed by the consequences of his own greed, not simply dismissed by a protective father. We need to keep the timeline. Let Leo make his play. We'll be ready. The play came sooner than anyone expected. It arrived in the form of a lavish engagement party, thrown by the Thorns at their sprawling Greenwich estate. It was less a celebration and more a public display of the merger, social and financial. The guest list was a who's who of East Coast money, all potential investors or partners. I was the prize on display, smiling in a couture dress that felt like a costume. Halfway through the evening, Gregory Thorn clinked a glass for silence. Leo stood beside him, a hand on the small of my back, his touch making my skin crawl. Friends, Gregory boomed, his face flushed with good wine and ambition. Tonight isn't just about two young people in love, though we're so happy for Leo and Anya. He patted Leo's shoulder. It's also about the future. The joining of two great families represents a new chapter, a powerhouse of innovation and investment. To that end, we're thrilled to announce the first joint venture of the Sterling Thorn Alliance, Horizon Renewables. A sleek corporate logo flashed on a screen behind him. Murmurs of interest rippled through the crowd. Renewable energy was the hot topic. It's a bold initiative, Gregory continued, requiring bold capital. We're opening a strategic investment round tonight to our closest friends and partners. This is a ground floor opportunity with projected returns that are, frankly, staggering. My blood turned to ice. Horizon Renewables. That was the name. In the other life it had been the poison chalice. The ground floor opportunity that sucked in my father's money to plug the holes in Thorn Capital's sinking ship. The venture would fail due to regulatory shifts and unforeseen market conditions, and the money would vanish. It was the beginning of the end. All eyes turned to my father. He was the bellwether. If Sterling Global invested, others would follow. My father, ever the gracious guest, smiled politely. It sounds ambitious, Gregory. My team would, of course, need to see the full prospectus and viability studies before Sterling Global could consider participation. A masterful non-answer. Gregory's smile tightened. Of course, Robert. Due diligence. But sometimes the future is about vision, not just spreadsheets. And with our families united, he let the implication hang. Your daughter is part of the deal. Leo squeezed my waist, whispering, "Isn't this exciting? Our first project together." I looked up at him, letting my eyes shine with what he would mistake for naive admiration. "It's amazing, Leo. You're so visionary." He preened. The hook was baited. Now I had to make sure my father didn't take the bite. The party swirled on, a cacophony of deal-making masked as celebration. I found a moment alone with my father near a quiet patio door. "Horizon Renewables," I said softly, sipping my water. "Sounds flashy." He looked at me, his sharp businessman's eyes seeing more than I showed. "Too flashy. Gregory's always been better at sales than substance. What do you think, Sparkplug? You're the one marrying into it." The question was a test. He was giving me an out, a chance to voice doubt. I chose my words with care. "I think vision needs a foundation. And I've been looking at Thorn Capital's recent SEC filings in my finance class." I met his gaze. Their debt-to-equity ratio is concerning. A lot of their vision seems to be built on leverage. I'd want to see a very solid foundation under Horizon before we put a single sterling brick on it. His eyebrows shot up. He hadn't expected the technical analysis. A slow, proud smile spread across his face. "You have been studying." He nodded, his mind made up. "Don't worry. I'll have Eris and his team pick it apart. No one uses my daughter as a down payment." Relief, warm and profound, washed through me. Phase 1. Defense was successful. But Leo and Gregory weren't deterred. With the direct approach stymied, they shifted to a softer, more insidious pressure. Me. The narrative became that I should advocate for the alliance, that as the future bridge between the families, I should encourage my father to have faith. Leo's manipulation became relentless. Your father respects you, Anya, he'd say over dinner. If you showed enthusiasm, told him you believed in us, in our future, it would mean everything. It's not just money. It's a symbol of his belief in us. He was trying to weaponize my affection for my father. The sheer, ugly calculation of it took my breath away. I pretended to be swayed. I could talk to him, I'd say hesitantly. But he's so stubborn about business. Maybe if the deal was structured differently? Something safer for Sterling Global to start? A smaller, symbolic investment. I was playing a double game, feeding his desperation while appearing to help. I suggested a minor, low-risk loan against Thorn Capital assets, something that would give him a temporary lifeline but would be secured by collateral we could seize. I presented it to Leo as a foot in the door, a way to prove trust. He, hungry for any cash, took it to his father. Mr. Eris, now fully briefed by me, structured the loan with ironclad terms and a brutal default clause. It was a bone thrown to a starving dog, but the bone was wired to a bomb. The loan went through. A temporary reprieve for the Thorns. A first tangible thread connecting their fate to ours, one I controlled. With the immediate financial pressure alleviated slightly, Leo's focus returned to solidifying our bond. The expectation of a summer together, of intimacy, loomed. I'd run out of academic excuses. It was then that I decided to deploy my own poison pill. Not against the company but against the engagement itself. I needed a scandal so profound, so public, it would render the alliance irrevocably toxic. And I had the perfect weapon dormant for months. Maya Finch. She was my insurance policy. I'd had the investigator keep a distant, periodic watch on her. The reports were bleak. Married off to a brutal man in her hometown, already with one child, another on the way, her spirit broken into a dull, hopeless resentment. She was a prisoner. But prisoners, when offered a key, can become unpredictable weapons. I arranged for an anonymous message to be delivered to her, through a convoluted chain that couldn't be traced back to me. It contained a single charged sentence. He got engaged. He's using her to get her family's money. Just like he used you. It was a lit match thrown into a barrel of emotional kerosene. I didn't know what she would do, but I knew her hatred for me and her betrayed sense of ownership over Leo would do the rest. I didn't have to wait long. A week later, Leo and I were at a tedious charity auction with our parents. He was bidding on a hideous face to impress the room. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a video file. With a sense of cold inevitability, I excused myself to the ladies' room and pressed play. The video was grainy, shot from a low angle, likely a phone hidden in a pile of clothes. The room was a cheap hotel room. And there they were, Leo and Maya. It was recent. Maya's face was harder, older, lined with the bitterness of her stolen life, but it was her. And Leo, his face blurred but unmistakable by his voice, his distinctive watch, his mannerisms. He was talking, his tone a mix of condescension and promise. Just sit tight. This engagement is a formality. A business necessity. Once the capital is secured from the Sterlings, things will change. I'll get you out of that town. Set you up somewhere nice. You just need to be patient. Maya's voice, husky with tears and rage. You promised me a future. You said we'd do it together. Now you're marrying her. It's not a real marriage, Maya. It's a merger. You understand business. This is the play. Now come here. The video ended. My hands were steady. I felt nothing but a cold, clear fury. He'd seen her. After her downfall, he'd sought her out. Not for love, but to keep his weapon on the shelf, to stoke her hopes and ensure her silence. The depravity of it was breathtaking. This was it. The detonator. I saved the file, sent a copy to my secure server and to Mr. Eris with a single word. Now. Then I returned to the table, my smile serene. Leo had won the vase for an obscene price. He grinned at me, leaning in. For our future home. How thoughtful, I murmured. The bomb was armed. The timer was set. All I needed was the right venue for the explosion. And I knew exactly where it would be. My 21st birthday gala in 2 weeks' time. The event was already planned, a bigger, more public version of my 20th. The whole world would be watching. Leo would bring his charm, his lies, and his certainty of victory. And I would bring the truth. The 2 weeks before my 21st birthday passed in a surreal haze of normalcy. I attended final exams, submitted papers, and smiled for engagement photos Leo insisted on taking. The video file was a dark, humming secret in the core of my being, a reactor powering my every move. Mr. Eris confirmed receipt and, with the efficiency of a seasoned warrior, began his final preparations. Legal briefs were drafted, shareholder notifications queued, security quietly briefed. The sterling penthouse was being prepared for the gala, but behind the scenes it was being fortified for a siege. Leo, emboldened by the short-term loan and believing my father's resistance was crumbling, grew more possessive, more confidently arrogant. He spoke of wedding dates, of honeymoons in the Maldives, of which wing of the Thorn estate would be ours. He was painting a future on a canvas he didn't know was already rotten, destined to peel and flake away to reveal the ugly wall beneath. The night of the gala arrived. The sterling penthouse glittered, a glass and steel jewel box suspended above the city lights. A string quartet played Vivaldi. The air was thick with the scent of gardenias and expensive perfume. I stood at the entrance with my parents, receiving guests, wearing a gown of midnight blue that made me feel like I was dressed for a funeral. My engagement ring, the cheap, fraudulent solitaire, caught the light like a winking, malevolent eye. My father squeezed my hand. "You look pale, Sparkplug." "Nerves." "Just a lot of excitement," I lied, forcing a bright smile. He leaned in, his voice low. "I had Eris dig deeper into that horizon proposal. It's a house of cards built on quicksand. We're not touching it. Don't let Leo pressure you tonight." The love and protectiveness in his voice were a physical ache. "I won't, Dad. I promise." He didn't know the pressure I was about to apply was of a very different kind. Leo arrived fashionably late, making an entrance in a Tom Ford tuxedo, his smile a weapon of mass charm. He made a beeline for me, kissing my cheek with a proprietary air that made my skin crawl. "Ready for our night, future Mrs. Thorne?" "It's certainly a night," I said enigmatically. He didn't notice. He was too busy scanning the room, calculating net worths, identifying potential marks for his failing ventures. I saw him gravitate toward my father, launching into his well-rehearsed spiel about synergy and legacy. My father listened politely, his expression giving nothing away. Dinner was served, speeches were made. My father gave a touching toast about watching his little girl grow up. He spoke of integrity, of carrying the sterling name with honor. Each word felt like a blessing and a judgment. Then, as dessert was being cleared, Leo stood up, casually tapping his fork against his champagne flute. The room quieted. This was his moment. He told me he had a surprise, a public declaration of his love. I knew what he really wanted. A dramatic, romantic spectacle to cement the alliance in the public eye, to make it harder for my father to back away. "If I could have everyone's attention," he began, his voice smooth, amplified by the quiet room. He looked at me, his eyes performing a depth of feeling that was a masterpiece of fraud. "Anya, my love. From the moment we were children, I knew you were special. I've watched you become not just a beautiful woman but a brilliant, strong one." He took a step toward me. "This past year, becoming your fiancé has been the greatest honor of my life. And tonight, in front of our families, our friends, I want to reaffirm my promise to you." He reached into his pocket. Not for a ring this time but for a small remote. He clicked it. A large screen at the far end of the room, meant for a montage of birthday wishes, flickered to life. "I asked our friends and family to share their memories, their well wishes for us," he said, his voice thick with faux emotion. "A little tribute to our journey." The first image appeared. A childhood photo of us at a polo match, aged about 7. Polite, us rippled through the crowd. Leo smiled, the picture of a sentimental man. This was my cue. While Leo was basking in the glow of the first photo, I gave a subtle, prearranged nod to Mr. Eris, who was standing near the AV control booth. He nodded back, his face grim. The childhood photo dissolved. But instead of another sweet memory, the screen went black for a second. Then grainy, shaky footage filled the massive screen. The audio, tinny but horrifyingly clear, blared through the penthouse's excellent sound system. "Just sit tight. This engagement is a formality. A business necessity. Once the capital is secured from the sterlings, things will change. I'll get you out of that town. Set you up somewhere nice. You just need to be patient. The room froze. On screen, Leo's blurred but unmistakable figure was visible, his hand on the arm of a weary-looking Maya Finch. Her face, etched with bitterness, filled the frame. You promised me a future. You said we'd do it together. Now you're marrying her. It's not a real marriage, Maya. It's a merger. You understand business. This is the play. The video stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, profound, a physical weight pressing down on the glittering room. Every head swiveled from the monstrous image on the screen to Leo, who stood frozen in the middle of the floor, his face a mask of utter, bloodless horror. Then as one they looked at me. I didn't move. I simply stood there, my expression not one of shock or heartbreak but of cold, calm revelation. I let them see the absence of surprise. I let them see the woman who had known. Chaos erupted. Leo's father, Gregory, shot to his feet, his face purple. What is this? What filthy trick is this? He bellowed, but his voice was drowned in the rising tide of gasps, shouts, and furious whispers. Cameras, which had been capturing a society event, were now documenting a historic scandal. Leo seemed to short-circuit. He stared at the blank screen, then at me, his mouth working soundlessly. The charming facade shattered, revealing the panicking, cornered animal beneath. And oh, he finally screamed, a raw, ragged sound. He lunged not at me but toward the AV booth. Turn it off. Who did this? Anya. This is a lie. Security, discreetly positioned by Mr. Eris, moved to intercept him, not as a guest but as a disturbance. The room was in an uproar. My mother had her hand over her mouth, tears of shock in her eyes. My father's face was granite, his eyes locked on Leo with a look of pure, murderous contempt. He put a protective arm around my mother's shoulders, his other hand reaching for me. But I stepped forward into the center of the maelstrom. I needed to control the narrative. No. I picked up the microphone Leo had dropped. The feedback squealed, cutting through the noise. Everyone turned to me. It's not a lie, Leo. My voice, amplified, was eerily calm. Cut through the chaos like a knife. It's a recording. Dated 3 weeks ago. A meeting you had with Maya Finch, the former student you've been secretly funding, the one you promised a future while you were planning a merger with me. She's insane. She set me up. Leo shouted, struggling against the security guards now holding his arms. He looked deranged, his hair disheveled, his tuxedo jacket twisted. She drugged me. I don't know what that is. You weren't drugged when you discussed the sterling capital, I said, my tone clinical. I looked out at the horrified, fascinated crowd. This engagement was never about love. It was a hostile takeover strategy. A plan to use my family's money and goodwill to bail out the failing Thorn Capital Group. Gasps. This was no longer just a sordid affair. It was financial treachery. Gregory Thorn roared, "You little bitch. How dare you? This is defamation." My father spoke then, his voice a low, dangerous thunder that silenced even Gregory. "The only defamation here is what your son has done to my daughter's name and my family's honor." He looked at Leo with icy finality. "The engagement is over. You will leave my home. Now." But Leo wasn't finished. He wrenched an arm free and pointed a trembling finger at me. His eyes were wild, desperate. He knew. "You've been different. You're like her, aren't you? You came back too." The words, a desperate, coded accusation only the three of us would understand, spilled out in his panic. "You did this. You ruined everything." The crowd buzzed in confusion. "Came back? What did that mean?" I simply looked at him with detached pity. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Leo. I think the stress of your situation has affected your judgment." I turned to the guards. "Please escort Mr. Thorne and his family out. They are no longer welcome." As the guards began to forcibly usher a spluttering, raging Leo and his apoplectic father toward the exit, I raised the microphone one last time. My voice rang out clear and firm. "For the avoidance of any doubt, let me be clear. The Sterling family will have no further association with Thorn Capital. Any pending dealings are hereby terminated." And as of this moment, I reached down, yanked the cheap solitaire off my finger and held it up. It looked absurdly tawdry under the crystal chandeliers. "This farce of an engagement is over." I dropped the ring. It hit the marble floor with a pathetic tinny clink, rolling to a stop at the feet of a stunned socialite. The silence returned, heavy and absolute. Then a single pair of hands began to clap. It was Mr. Eris. Then my father, his eyes shining with a fury and a pride so intense it stole my breath. Then my mother, then others, until the room erupted not in gossip, but in a wave of supportive, furious applause, a verdict rendered by the court of our world. Leo at the door heard it. He turned, and for one last second, our eyes met across the ruined wreckage of his plans. I saw the hatred, the shock, but also the dawning, absolute comprehension. He knew now. He knew I remembered everything. Then he was gone, shoved into the elevator, his dynasty's reputation in tatters. The party was obviously over. Guests departed in a hushed, electrified rush, already dialing their phones. The scandal would be on the front page of every business section and gossip column by morning. My parents enveloped me in a crushing hug. "My brave, brilliant girl," my father murmured into my hair, his voice thick. "I'm so sorry. I should have seen it." "You see it now," I whispered back, the adrenaline beginning to recede, leaving a hollow, shaking exhaustion in its wake. "That's all that matters." Upstairs, in the quiet of my old bedroom, I finally let the tremors take me. I sat on the edge of my bed, shaking. It was done. The engagement was shattered. Leo was publicly destroyed. The immediate threat was neutralized. But as I stared at my bare finger, I knew it wasn't over. A publicly humiliated predator with a failing company was more dangerous than a confident one. He had nothing left to lose. The financial battle was still to be fought. And the ghost of Maya Finch, her vengeance partially served via that video, was still out there, a wild card filled with a new, different kind of hate. I had won the night. But the war for my family's survival was entering a new and perhaps even more treacherous phase. The fallout was swift and brutal. The morning after the gala, the story was everywhere. Not just the society pages but the financial news. Thorn Ayre's sordid plot. Engagement exposed as hostile takeover gambit. Sterling heiress unveils fiancé's secret dealings with former student. The video, though never publicly released in full, was described in salacious, damning detail. Thorn Capital's stock, already fragile, went into free fall. Creditors called in loans. The short-term loan we'd extended, the one with the ironclad default clauses, was now due. They couldn't pay. Mr. Eris moved with surgical precision, seizing the collateral, a portfolio of their least toxic assets and a controlling stake in their one remaining profitable tech subsidiary. It was a financial amputation, leaving Thorn Capital bleeding out on the floor of the stock exchange. My father, his protective instincts now fused with a cold, corporate fury, went on the offensive. Sterling Global issued a statement detailing the termination of all associations and announcing a review of any past dealings with Thorn entities. It was a corporate excommunication. In the world of high finance, trust is the only real currency, and Leo had set his on fire. No one would touch them. I retreated from the public eye, back to the university to finish my junior year finals. The atmosphere was different now. The whispers were about me again, but the tone had shifted from disdain to a kind of awed, fearful respect. I was no longer the stingy heiress. I was the girl who had publicly detonated her own engagement and brought down a financial dynasty in the process. People gave me a wide berth. I preferred it. Leo tried to contact me. Desperate, rambling emails, pleading phone calls from unknown numbers that I blocked. He swung between fury, begging, and threats. One voicemail, slurred and venomous, stood out. "You think you've won, you cold bitch? You and that washed-up lawyer? I have nothing left. Nothing. You remember what that feels like, don't you? You should." The threat was clear and it chilled me. A man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous creature on earth. I doubled the security detail Mr. Eris had insisted on for my family. My father, now fully aware of the venom in Leo's soul, complied without argument. Graduation approached. I was graduating a year early, summa cum laude, with a job offer. Not just an offer, an expectation, to join Sterling Global's executive training program. My father was stepping back, planning a long-delayed world tour with my mother. He wanted me, his spark plug, to be ready to take the helm. The weight of it was terrifying and right. But before I could step into that future, I had to ensure the past was truly buried. Leo was a cornered rat, but a cornered rat can still carry plague. I needed to know his next move. And I had a suspicion born of my own memory of his ruthlessness. I had the investigator who had been so useful with Maya turn his focus fully on Leo. Track his movements, his contacts, his finances. The report that came back was bleak. Thorn Capital had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Their Greenwich estate was in foreclosure. Leo was living in a rented apartment, his credit destroyed, his name toxic. He'd been seen in the back rooms of high-stakes poker games and, more worryingly, meeting with known associates of a notoriously aggressive private equity vulture, a man named Silas Rourke. Rourke specialized in picking apart bankrupt companies, but he had a darker reputation for dealing with problematic individuals who stood in his way. Leo was selling the last scraps of his birthright and possibly his soul. "He's looking for a weapon," I told Mr. Aris in his book-lined office. The smell of old leather and wisdom was a comfort. "He can't beat us financially or socially. So he'll try something else. Something physical. Or a smear so deep it sticks even to us." Mr. Aris steepled his fingers. "The security is comprehensive. Your parents are well protected. As are you. A smear. He has no credibility left." "He doesn't need credibility if he has a compelling enough story," I said, my mind racing. "What's the one thing that could make people question everything that happened? That could paint me as the villain?" He frowned. "I don't see." "Maya," I said, the name a bitter taste. "What if she recants? What if she goes public saying I manipulated her, that I forced her to make that video, that Leo was the victim of my elaborate scheme to seize his company? She's desperate, bitter, and she hates me more than she hates him. If Rourke or Leo offered her enough money, a way out of her hellhole life." Mr. Aris's face grew grave. "It would be a circus. It wouldn't hold up in court, but in the court of public opinion, it could muddy the waters for years." I knew I had to see her. It was a risk, but a calculated one. I needed to look into her eyes, to see if the spark of vengeance Leo could offer was brighter than the ashes of her current life. Using the investigator, I found her. Not in her hometown, but in a grim, subsidized apartment complex on the ragged edge of the city. She'd run. With her 2 toddlers in a battered stroller, she'd fled her husband. She was trying to disappear, a ghost with 2 clinging anchors. I went alone, telling no one, dressed in jeans and a hoodie. The security detail, at my insistence, stayed a discreet block away. This was a conversation that required the illusion of vulnerability. She opened the door on the 5th knock, her face wary and exhausted. Then she saw me. The exhaustion evaporated, replaced by a shock so profound it left her speechless. She looked older than she was, her eyes hollow, her hands chapped. But the hatred was there, banked like a coal fire. "You," she breathed. "Can I come in?" I asked, my voice neutral. She laughed, a short, harsh sound. "To slum it? To gloat?" But she stepped back, waving me into the bleak, toy-strewn living room. The air smelled of instant noodles and despair. I didn't sit. "Leo's looking for you." She froze, her back to me as she pretended to adjust a blanket on a sleeping child. "I have nothing to say to him. He has money. Or access to it. Not much, but enough. Enough to get you an apartment somewhere. A new identity. Child support." She turned slowly. "What's your point, Anya? You came here to tell me my ex-lover might throw me some scraps? I know that. He's called. He's offered." My heart sank. And he wants me to go on camera. To say you are a manipulative psychopath. That you blackmailed me. That you set him up because you were jealous of me. She spat the words. "He wants to trade my last shred of whatever this is," she gestured at her life, "for a lie that helps him maybe salvage a penny from the wreckage you made." There was no "we" in her statement. No alliance. Just a transactional assessment. "What did you tell him?" I asked quietly. She stared at me, her gaze tunneling into mine, past the hoodie and the carefully arranged calm. "I told him I'd think about it." She took a step closer. "But I have a question for you first. That night when my parents came, you knew. You nodded. You knew I'd come back. Just like I knew you had. Didn't you? No more masks. Not here." "Yes." A tremor went through her. The confirmation, spoken aloud, seemed to both validate and devastate her. "All of it? The company? Your parents? The accident? All of it?" She closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. So you weren't just lucky. You were fighting a war I didn't even know we were in. I was surviving, I corrected, my voice hard. You started the war. I finished it. She opened her eyes, and to my astonishment, the hatred had banked, replaced by a terrible, exhausted understanding. You did, didn't you? You won. You have everything. And I have this. She looked around the shabby room. So why are you here? To offer me a better deal than Leo? To buy my silence with sterling charity? No, I said. I'm here to tell you the truth. Leo's deal is a fantasy. The money behind him is Silas Rourke. You know that name? He's a shark. He'll use you, and when you're no longer useful, he'll drop you right back here or somewhere worse. Leo can't protect you. He can't even protect himself. And you can, she sneered, but it lacked conviction. I'm not offering protection. I'm offering a choice. I took a folded envelope from my pocket and placed it on the rickety coffee table. In there is the name and number of a social worker who specializes in helping women in your situation. She's good and she's discreet. There's also a one-time grant from an anonymous donor, enough for a security deposit, a few months' rent in a better neighborhood, and childcare so you can get a GED, maybe a vocational course. It's not a fortune. It's a start. A real one. No strings except one. You walk away from Leo Thorne forever. You never speak my name again. She stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. Why? After everything. Because, I said, my voice barely a whisper, I looked at you on that curb being dragged away by your parents, and I saw the weapon I'd made. I used your prison to break you. That was my vengeance. But I don't want your soul on my conscience too. This isn't kindness, Maya. It's cleanup. For a long minute she didn't move. The only sounds were the soft breathing of her children and the distant wail of a siren. Then slowly she picked up the envelope. She didn't open it. She just held it, her knuckles white. He's going to try to hurt you, she said, not looking at me. He's speaking with dangerous people about ending this situation in irreversible ways. His thinking isn't stable. I know. Most people would say he deserves consequences far harsher than prison. The words were flat, matter-of-fact. The chill returned. That's not who I am. She finally looked at me, a ghost of her old, mocking smile on her lips. Isn't it? You killed his future. You killed mine. What's one more death to a girl like you? I had no answer for that. I turned and left, closing the door softly on the ruins of her life and the chilling prophecy she'd uttered. Walking back to the waiting car, the city noise suddenly too loud, I knew she was right about one thing. Leo was planning something extreme. A permanent solution. The security, the legal walls, they were all defenses. I was still reacting. It was time to end this. Not just defeat him, but remove him as a threat. Permanently. And I knew with a cold certainty that the final move would not be played in a boardroom or a courtroom. It would be played in the shadows, where broken men make their last, desperate stands. I had taken everything from him. Now I had to make sure he had nowhere left to fall but down. The graduation ceremony was a blur of green robes, proud smiles, and the heavy, humid air of a New England spring. My parents sat in the front row, my mother dabbing her eyes, my father's chest puffed out with a pride so profound it seemed to deflect the lingering glances of curiosity still aimed at our family. The Thorne scandal was old news now, replaced by fresher gossip, but its shadow had made the Sterlings both objects of sympathy and subjects of wary respect. We were the family that couldn't be bullied. I accepted my diploma, shook the dean's hand, and felt not the thrill of accomplishment, but the weight of a chapter closing. The university had been my bunker, my training ground. Now I was heading into the open field. I started at Sterling Global the following Monday. My father, true to his word, was phasing himself out, preparing for his grand tour with my mother. He installed me in an office with a view of the river, not as an executive trainee, but as a special advisor to the CEO. Him. It was a title that granted me access to everything with the expectation I would learn everything. My first act was to review the Thorne Capital bankruptcy proceedings. Mr. Aris had been relentless. The carcass of Leo's empire was being picked clean by creditors, with Sterling Global first in line thanks to our secured loan. We acquired the last of their viable assets for pennies on the dollar. The Thorne name was being systematically erased from the financial world. But Leo himself remained a phantom ache, a shadow in the peripheral vision of my new life. The investigators' reports grew more ominous. He'd sold his watch, his car. He'd been evicted from the rented apartment. He was crashing on the couches of increasingly unsavory characters, his conversations with Silas Rourke's enforcers growing more frequent. The phrase permanent solution was mentioned again. Paranoia became my constant companion. I checked the security feeds on my phone obsessively. I varied my routes to work. The freedom I'd fought for felt like a gilded cage. Then it was the first clear sign something wasn't right. It was a Thursday evening. I was working late, the floor silent except for the hum of the servers. Martin, my head of security, had insisted on driving me home himself. As we pulled out of the underground garage, a motorcycle, lights off, shot out from behind a concrete pillar and swerved directly toward my door. Martin, a former Special Forces driver, reacted with inhuman speed, wrenching the armored sedan into a controlled skid that took the impact on the reinforced rear quarter panel instead. A motorcycle suddenly veered dangerously close, forcing Martin into a sharp defensive turn. No plates. No identification. A perfect, deniable accident that wasn't. I sat in the back seat, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs, but my mind was eerily calm. This was it. The move from the shadows. Leo had pulled the trigger. "We're going to the safe house," Martin said, his voice a gravelly line of fury. "I'm calling Mr. Eris and your father." "No," I said, my own voice surprising me with its steadiness. "Not the safe house. Take me home. And don't call my father." "Not yet. Miss Sterling, that was I know what it was. And if we run and hide, he'll just try again when we least expect it. We need to end this. Tonight." Martin argued, but he saw the resolve in my eyes, the same resolve he'd seen in my father for decades. He made calls, but not to my parents. He activated a different protocol. We drove not to my penthouse but to my father's study in our family home. It was a room of quiet power, all dark wood and leather, the scent of old books and responsibility. Mr. Eris arrived 20 minutes later, his face grim. I laid it out for them. The investigators' reports. Maya's warning. The motorcycle. He's not going to stop. He's hired Rourke's people. They'll keep coming until one of them gets lucky. We can't live in a bunker forever. My father, summoned by Martin despite my instructions, stood in the doorway, his face ashen. "Anya, we go to the police. We put him away." "With what?" Mr. Eris said quietly. "A reckless motorcyclist who got away? Circumstantial reports of conversations? Silas Rourke is a ghost. Leo Thorne is a bankrupt, disgraced man with no visible means to hire an assassin. It would be a stalemate. And during that stalemate, Anya and you and your wife are in constant danger." The room was silent. We all knew he was right. The law moved slowly and it required evidence. We had threats but not proof. Leo was playing a dirtier game. I took a deep breath. "I know where he'll be tonight." They both stared at me. The investigator tracked him to a flop house near the old docks. "He's broke, desperate, and he just paid for a hit. He'll be waiting for the news. He'll be alone, drinking, riding the high of thinking he's finally striking back." I looked at Martin. "I want to talk to him." "Absolutely not," my father barked. "It's the only way," I insisted, a terrible plan crystallizing in my mind. "He wants me. My fear. My pain. My surrender. If I give him the chance to gloat, to see me one last time, he'll take it. He won't be able to resist. And we'll have everything we need." It was a gamble of monstrous proportions. But I was done reacting. I was done being prey. 2 hours later, a nondescript sedan pulled up in the derelict warehouse district. The air smelled of salt, rust, and decay. Martin and 2 of his most trusted men were shadows around me, armed, wired, invisible in the darkness. The flop house was a crumbling brick building, a single dim light in a 4th-floor window. I walked in alone as instructed. The lobby was a tomb. I climbed the groaning stairs, my footsteps echoing in the hollow silence. I stopped at the door of room 407. I could hear muffled voices from a TV inside. I knocked. Silence. Then shuffling footsteps. The door opened a crack, a chain still secured. Leo's face appeared in the gap. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes bloodshot and sunk deep into sockets of sleepless rage. For a second he didn't recognize me in the dim hall light. Then he did. His eyes widened, then narrowed into slits of pure, vicious triumph. You, he breathed, the smell of cheap whiskey wafting out. You got the message. I got it, I said, my voice carefully flat, scared. Please, Leo. Let me in. Let's talk. He laughed, a dry, cracking sound. He unhooked the chain and yanked the door open, pulling me inside before slamming it shut. The room was a squalid cell. A stained mattress, a single chair, bottles on the floor. The TV blared a game show. Talk? You want to talk now? After you destroyed me? He paced like a caged animal, his energy manic. I saw the news today. Sterling Global acquired the last of the Thorn patents. Picking my bones clean. It's just business, Leo, I whispered, backing toward the grimy window, playing the role of the terrified girl who'd come to plead. Business, he roared, spittle flying. It was revenge. You remembered. You knew everything and you set me up. You took my company, my name, my future. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in like claws. But I'm not finished. You know that, don't you? The motorcycle was just the first love note. Rourke's men are very creative. I let a tear trace down my cheek. It wasn't hard. The fear was real. Why, Leo? We could have had everything. We did have everything, he screamed into my face. And you threw it away for some moral high ground? Your father? Your pathetic family. He shoved me away and I stumbled against the wall. Well, they'll mourn you. Deeply. And then maybe a year from now, a tragic accident will befall them too. An accident, abroad. Some vague tragedy he hinted at in their Tuscan villa. So sad. He was confessing. To everything. Past, present, and future. He was so high on his own perceived victory, on finally having me in his power, that he couldn't stop. You'll never get away with it, I said, my voice shaking. I already am, he crowed, pouring himself another drink with a trembling hand. Who will they suspect? A bankrupt nobody? I'm a ghost, Anya. And after tonight you will be too. He took a step toward me, his intention clear in his eyes. It wasn't just about hurting me, it was about control. About erasing me with his own hands. That's when the door exploded inward. It happened in a blur of controlled violence. Martin and his men were a storm of black tactical gear. Leo had time for one look of stunned, absolute betrayal before he was on the ground, pinned, a knee in his back. One of the men held a small, sophisticated digital recorder. The red light was on. You're recording? Leo shrieked, struggling. It's illegal. It won't hold up. In this state, with a credible threat to life, one-party consent applies, Martin growled, hauling him to his feet. And she wasn't the only one listening. From the hallway, 2 uniformed police officers and a detective in a rumpled suit walked in. They'd heard everything from the live feed in the sedan. The detective looked at me, then at the recorder, then at Leo's twisted, furious face. Leo Thorne, you're under arrest for arranging serious harm, criminal conspiracy, and making violent threats. You have the right to remain silent. As they read him his rights, Leo's eyes found mine over the detective's shoulder. The triumph was gone, replaced by a hollow, bottomless horror. He finally understood the depth of the trap. I hadn't just come to plead. I'd come as the final piece of bait. I walked out of that stinking room without a backward glance. The night air had never tasted so clean. The legal proceedings were swift. With the audio recording, the testimony of the security team, and the evidence from the motorcycle incident, Leo had no defense. He was sentenced to 25 years without parole. Silas Rourke, insulated by layers of underlings, escaped prosecution but suffered a mysterious, catastrophic leak of his client list to several international regulatory bodies. His empire crumbled in a different, quieter way. With the threat extinguished, life began to unfold in a way I'd almost forgotten was possible. My parents left on their world tour, my mother's smiles finally reaching her eyes again. I threw myself into Sterling Global not as an avenger but as an heir. The company was my legacy, not my fortress. Years passed. I earned an MBA at night. I sat on the board. I made decisions that were shrewd, sometimes tough, but always with the integrity my father had prized. The ghost of the old, trusting Anya was gone, but in her place was a woman who understood the value of what she protected. One evening, 5 years after graduation, I was leaving the Sterling Tower late. My driver was held up in traffic. I decided to walk the few blocks to the upscale apartments where I now lived. The city was alive, glittering with the success I'd fought so hard to preserve. That's when I saw her. At first I didn't recognize the woman pushing a double stroller, her head down against a chill wind. She was dressed in neat, affordable clothes, her hair cut in a practical, short style. Then she looked up, navigating the stroller onto a bus. Our eyes met through the grimy window. Maya Finch. There was no hatred there. No envy. Just a flat, exhausted recognition and perhaps a flicker of something else. Resignation? The bus pulled away, swallowed by the river of traffic. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Chloe, hurried up beside me. "Miss Sterling, your car is here. Everything all right?" I watched the bus's taillights disappear. "Yes," I said, turning toward the waiting town car. "Everything's fine." I didn't know Maya's story, not anymore. Had she used the grant? Had she found her footing? Or had she simply traded one kind of struggle for another? It didn't matter. She was a face in the crowd now, a ghost from a past that no longer had any power to haunt me. Sliding into the quiet warmth of the car, I looked at the cityscape blurring past. My city. My family's legacy secure. The people I loved safe. The revenge was complete. The ledger was settled. But as I arrived at my building, greeted by the doorman's respectful nod, I realized the most important victory wasn't in Leo's prison cell or in Maya's anonymous struggle. It was in the quiet of my apartment, in the peace that now felt unshakable. It was in the ability to look forward without the shadow of the past darkening every step. I had set out to destroy those who ruined me, and I had. But in doing so, I had also reclaimed something far more precious. A future bright and unburdened that was entirely, unequivocally my own. The end.